So welcome today's webinar on native cover crops. My name is Wendy Sullivan. I'm the catchment coordinator here in Marlborough for New Zealand Landcare Trust. My role is to support farmers and growers with their environmental projects and land sustainability projects, and a key aspect of that is to provide workshops and learning opportunities on these topics. You're all on mute, but we want this to be an interactive session, so please feel free to put your questions or your comments into the chat bar at the bottom of your screen. If you've got anything to share, if you can put that in there, that would be great too. Today we've got two speakers. We've got Lin Yang from Plant and Food Research Limited, and then we'll follow on with Sarah St George from Villa Maria and Hawke's Bay. Now, this is a topic that really intrigues me. I'm got an ecology background, so I really like the idea of incorporating plants into a horticultural landscape. It just seems to make sense. But talking with Lin and Sarah before our Zoom call today, it's clearly more complicated than just putting a few native plants in the ground. And it's a science that's still quite new and still being explored. So this webinar is really about keeping you in the loop with that research that's going on rather than being able to present you with a fait accompli. We'll be focusing largely on the new science of native cover crops rather than the better used introduced cover crops, but of course the two aren't exclusive. So I'm going to pass on to Lin now.
Thank you, Sarah. So today, I would like to discuss with you the possibility of using native ground cover as an underground weed control solution. So I'm Lin from Plant and Food Research, and I work as a research associate for our viticulture and enology team. I did some native ground cover research as a part of my honor study. And since then, I was leading a MRC-funded project in this area. So using native ground cover as an underground weed control. In 2006, the ecology professor Steve Ratton in Lincoln University came up with this idea. And supervised by Steve, there was a PhD student devoted her study in this topic. And the botanist Colin Merck from Landcare chose the varieties for the project. The project revealed very promising results, including the ability of some chosen species to suppress weed, the improved soil quality, and the improved soil biodiversity. Sarah, I don't have control of the slide. Sorry. Great, thank you. But years has passed since the promising result been published, but no vineyard has been able to adopt this practice on a large scale. And that is because there are some knowledge gap and critical challenge that need to be addressed before we can really put this method into application. So my presentation today will show you those challenges, the issue we have to think about regarding this method, and what up-to-date knowledge and research say about those issues, and what we don't know yet, and what we really need to know. So those issues we need to consider include the plant species selection, establishment, ground cover development, interaction with vine, and their long-term maintenance. Now I will dive into each sections. So plant species selection. So as an underground ground cover, the grow height should not exceed 30 centimeters ideally. And we want them to form a dense carpet on the floor to suppress weed. And also ideally, it shouldn't have a big seasonal density variation, because if it loses density for a big period of time, it will open window for the weed to invade. And also, we need to know their growth rate to determine the planting density. They should be frost tolerant for Marlborough region. And also they should be pest and disease free kind of, because we don't want to put extra chemicals into the vineyard to grow those crops. We also would need to know their lifespan, how long they are going to be there, and if they can set seed and regenerate. And any ecological benefit would be great. So in this area, what do we know? There are some botanical book and nursery informations that give a general rough idea of what species we could be using. In PFR, we had a project last year, studied the growth rate and the water usage of 3 selected species. There's another PhD student from Mass University that studied quite a wide range of ground cover species on their growth rate, growth height, density, etc. So some quite valuable data. You're welcome to note down those citations. There you can find them on Google Scholar and online. This study is the Lincoln PhD study I mentioned before, investigating the ecological benefit. So as a part of my study, I made a booklet of the possible species, which summarized the existing knowledge of those species. And a column from Land Care kindly advised on this work. So if you want to know what species you can use, you are welcome to come to talk to us. So establishment. First, the seed or seedlings, because there's a big cost differences between these two methods. So most attempts so far used seedlings, which are very expensive. Using seed would be much cheaper, but we need a significant amount of research and technology to be developed in this area. For example, we need to know how to produce those seeds. What are the germination rate, what are the germination condition, etc. All those knowledge we don't know. And if we are going to use a seedling, then we need a cheaper and more innovative way to put them in. So after we put the seed and the little plants into the ground, we need to protect them from the weed invasion until they fully establish and cover the strips. So once you put them in, you cannot spray herbicide anymore, and weed control would be too expensive to be possible. Some possible solution could be using a special hydroseeding material that promotes the growth of the native seed and suppress weed at the same time. The hydroseeding material we have at the moment is really for the fast germinating long seed, which is not really suitable for this purpose. Yeah, so we have to do more work on this if you want to use this method. Or we could try to find a mulching material that lasts longer, so we could reduce the initial planting density to bring down the cost. The last thing I think would be interesting is to try to use biology assist. I recently read how you could improve your soil microbial biodiversity and change the ratio of fungi to bacteria to help control the weed. Quite intriguing. A lot of new research in this area. Yeah, so in general, for this establishment part, the technology need to be developed because most of those things we don't know. The next one is the ground cover development. So in this area, since we are trying to grow those native ground cover as a crop, really. So it would be useful to know what's their optimum water nutrient requirement. So it will help us to establish them to a full cover more successfully. But the knowledge in this area also lacking because there are not many people tried to grow them as a crop before. Also would like to know if there are any vineyard pests like rabbit and sheep who are happily nibbling on them. Sarah will touch on it later. Yeah, I know in the Villa Maria project, it has been mentioned. So interaction with vine. So we need to know if those native ground cover has any influence on the vine vegetative growth and yield and on vine quality. So this is in general divided in two stages. The establishing stage, first 1 or 2 years, the ground cover plants still has a very small root system, but they are actively growing. And the next stage, when they're fully establishment, they will have a bigger root system, a little bit denser, but the matured plant maybe have a different nutrient and water requirement. The only study I'm aware of in this area is the Villa Maria project, which Sarah will tell us the detail later. So the last one is the long-term maintenance. This part is very important because, you know, after all the effort that we put those plants in, get them established, so kind of fully established ground cover strip hold its ground from the weed invasion. And if it needs some help, can we help them through like shape grazing or mechanical mowing at a set height, you know, to help to cut the invasive weed that manage to grow through them. Or herbicide, maybe not, because, you know, we tried this method to move away from the herbicide. And also would be interesting to know their lifespan, how long they are going to stay there, and if they can self-seeding and regenerate on long term. Yeah, so there's there's no publication so far in this area, so it would be an area we need to explore. Yes, a lot to think about and to discover. So we are from here. Our research program would like to research first on the long-term maintenance, because, you know, after people put a lot of money and effort to get those plants established, if they have to repeat this process again and again, then we can pretty much forget about this method. And so if we find that the native ground cover can suppress weed and being maintained on long term, then we would need to know the interaction between the fully established ground cover and the grapevine, how they influence the yield and the vine quality, and also if there are any negative impact, is this negative impact within the threshold? So if these two showed the green lights, it means that this ground native weed control method is feasible for the vineyard floor weed control. Then it will give the government and company more confident to invest into the seed research and production, and also other technology development, because, you know, they need to know if they're going to produce it, the vineyard are going to buy them, and they are going to apply it. So yeah, it's kind of the company don't, or the research don't have the confidence to invest a lot of money into this research unless we know this practice will be taken up. Yeah, so that's pretty much me. Thank you.
Well, thanks, Lin. I'll just unshare. Does anyone have any questions for Lin at this stage? Well, I've got one, Lin. What do you think about using mixed species, or do you recommend just using single species?
I think for the future, the mixed species will have to be the way to go, because now when we look at those species, they kind of has a bit different growing pattern. For example, they are a group of plants. They grow very dense. So once they are there, it's hard for any way to set a foot in. But because they grow so dense, they also grow slower. And then there's another group of plants. They spread really fast, but because they cover a big area in a short period of time. But because they grow so fast, they don't grow that dense. And also, there are some plants that it keeps its density for the whole year. And there are some wonderful plants that lose their density a little bit in winter or summer. And also, you know, the shape of the plants. Some of the plants, you know, it just stay round. And then you will have those 4 corner on the round bowl that will have the weight growing through. And then there are some plants, you know, they just send shoots out and grow in any gap they can find. So, you know, if you put them together, they will compensate on each other's growth speed, growing pattern. That, you know, what we really want is a lot of species that will wave into each other, compensate each other, and, you know, suppress the weight as a community. And I got the feeling if we have a mixed species, it will be better for the soil microbial diversity as well. Yeah, so definitely the mix is the way to go.
Excellent, thank you. Now I'm going to pass over to Sarah from Villa Maria. Villa Maria's work on this project was pretty much what caught my attention and made me think of having a webinar because it seems so fascinating, but I'll let Sarah explain it a little bit further.
Thanks, Wendy. I'll just share my screen, hang on. You can all see that? Take it as yes. So it's pretty awesome that we're having this conversation. There's obviously a high demand for it, and I want it to be a bit more of an open conversation. I'd love to hear what other people are doing in this sort of space, and I'm sure that's sort of why people are tuning in as well. So we started the Sustainable Vineyard Full Project in 2019. Raquel Callis started it. And so we've been doing it for 3 years, and we've got one more season to go on it. So I thought we'd start off by talking about our current situation in viticulture. So here we do conventional and organic. So for conventional blocks, we herbicide spray them. And for our organic blocks, we undervine cultivate. I know some people do some undervine mowing and things like that, but these are the 2 main ones that we do. There's some quite obvious issues with both of these methods. There's a huge cost involved, so you have to pay for your tractors, your implements, labour, diesel, chemical. I worked out that it's about $120 to $180 per hectare per year for all of those things for herbicide spraying, and about $330 per hectare per year for undervine cultivation. There's a huge time part of it as well. For herbicide spraying, we usually do 2 to 3 passes a year, which takes roughly 30 minutes per hectare. That might be a bit of an overestimate, but not too far off. And for cultivation, we usually do about 6 passes a year, which takes about an hour per hectare to go. So yeah, it's quite a big time spent. And so like the vineyard that I'm on currently is about 85 hectares, which is also the block where we've done our trials. So if you multiply it up, it actually takes quite a long time for one pass of herbicide. It would probably take about 40 hours to complete, and cultivation is about 85 hours to complete just for this one vineyard, which is one of our 7 in Hawke's Bay. So I mean, we spend quite a lot of time doing it. It's also poor for the environment. We emit all these carbon emissions with each each tractor pass that we do every year, so pretty keen to reduce those. It's poor for your soil health. Undervine cultivating can reduce your carbon in the soil. Tractor passes also add to your compaction of your soil. And there's a pretty poor public reputation as well surrounding it. So especially with glyphosate, people aren't too keen on that. So from this pretty dire situation that we're in, we sort of had a vision of an alternative to herbicide and cultivation. We wanted to create a self-sustaining system that requires minimal intervention. And by doing this, we wanted to reduce our tractor passes, reduce our chemical application, and improve our soil health. And we also wanted to increase the vineyard biodiversity just so we can get some of those beneficial insects and whatnot onto our vineyard. But we wanted to be able to do all of this while still maintaining our yield and wine quality. So we chose 2 different blocks to do it on our Tiawa vineyard, Merlot 11 and Serraro 1. So if, I don't know if anyone does, but anyone that knows the site, the Serraro 1's based out the front by State Highway 50, and the Merlot 11 is behind the new winery that we have. So the Merlot block we use for rosé. It's 2 cane pruned and it's on majority of a silt loam soil, and we targeted at about 12 tonnes per hectare. Whereas for our Syrah block we use for reserve tier wine, it's also on 2 cane prune, but it's on gravels, and we targeted at about 6 tonnes per hectare. Species, these were all low growing species, which was quite what attracted us. We read Jean-Marie Tompkins' thesis on ecosystem services provided by native New Zealand plants, and I would highly recommend reading that if you're sort of getting into this space. It's quite an interesting study, and she talks about conservation, biological controls, marketing opportunities, biodiversity conservation, soil health, greenhouse sequestration, and weed suppression with planting native species. We also talked to Robert McGowan, who's an ethnobotanist and considered a kaumatua by Ngāti Kahungunu. He does a lot of work with native plants, and so he was an awesome person to talk about with that. And we also talked to Marie Taylor, who at the time was the owner of Plant Hawke's Bay Nursery. So we sort of decided on, for Merlot, we decided on Lectinella squalidea, variation Plaque Black, Lobelia angulata, Carex commons, which is more commonly known as brown sedge. And then for the Syrah block, we chose Caprosma aceriosa, which is known as sand caprosma, and Caprosma seriosa variation Hauer, and also the Carex commons. Not only we did native plantings, but we also did 2 different mixes of cover crops. These were sort of chosen by having a discussion with Jonathan Hamlet, which at the time was our viticulturalist, and Marin from Kiwi Seeds, who was an agronomist. We came up with 2 different mixes. So we had mix A, which is proper tall fescue, strawberry clover, crimson clover, Seaton Park, subterranean clover, sheep's burnet, and plantain. And then mix B had creeping tall fescue, round top, strawberry clover, Seaton Park, subterranean clover, and alyssum. So we sort of incorporated all of these and made a trial design, which is a randomized plot design. The natives, which is the 3 natives plus a control, which is a herbicide strip. We replicated them 4 times, and each replica is 3 bays long. And the cover crop mix, we had 3 treatments, the 2 mixes and the herbicide control. We replicated them 3 times, and each replica is 5 bays long. So, pushing them initially, we herbicide sprayed under the vines that we were going to plant, and then we went through with a brawn and roll hack and undervine cultivated them. For the natives, we went ahead the day before planting and we dug a hole and then we went through and planted them the next day. We chose to do them in the spacing of 2 plantings between each vine for the Leptonella, the Lobelia, and the Coprosma, and we chose for the Carex commons to put 3 between each vine. So for all of those plantings, both across the Merlot and the Syrah, we ended up spending $4,394, which is quite a lot, but we were hoping that that's sort of just going to be like a one-off cost. And for the cover crops, we went through, and after herbicide spraying and under vine cultivating, we went through and hand hoed them to create a good seedbed. We hand seeded them and stomped them on by foot, and so for all the seed mixes, it cost us $345. So throughout the season, we take measurements to see the interaction between the plantings and the vine. So we do vine water levels, and we do this from stem water potentials and pre-dawn leaf water potentials, and we do this using a pressure bomb is what we call it. I'm not sure if that's the technical term, but that's what we use. And we take vine growth measurements, so we go through and measure the shoot lengths and take the pruning weights, and then for the yield we take the kg per vine measurements and 100 berry weight, and then we send some samples off to the lab and they do the bricks, the pH and the TA. Throughout the season we also have to do some maintenance, just because we're doing a trial, so we need to see the actual interaction of the plantings rather than the plantings plus some weeds. So we had to herbicide the control plots, and then we hand weeded the natives. So some results. This shows the statistical differences in the box. In the first year there was pretty significant difference. We were pretty excited, and we thought, oh, we might be onto something here, but sorry to say, but as the years have gone on, we've seen more and more significant results, and it seems as though the plantings are sort of competing with the vines. So something to note is in the Carex commons in our Merlot, it hasn't seemed to significantly affect the vine growth and the yield as much as the other planting. So I mean, that could be quite promising. But I will say, trend wise, the control was always better off than all the treatments, which is sad to say and breaks my heart a little bit, but I thought we need to be quite transparent in what we've found, and so pretty keen to talk about issues that we've had, and hopefully we can learn from our mistakes. In hindsight, the Merlot 11 site probably wasn't the best trial plot to try on, because there's quite a lot of soil variability throughout the rows. We're hoping that sort of the randomized plot design is sort of help reduce some of those reduce some of the differences between them, but I'm not really too sure about that. In the first year we had quite a lot of problem with rabbits. I'm not sure why it was just the first. It hasn't seemed to be a problem since then, but the lobelia was damaged, or 5% of the lobelia was damaged in the first year, and 22% of the leptonella was damaged. The establishment has been extremely slow, and it's still pretty much ongoing for all of them, or all of the natives anyway. We're having quite a hard time getting them to spread out. And then the in-season maintenance, the hand weeding has been a huge problem for us. It takes a really long time and it's quite costly. I just got the last invoice for it. we just did the Merlot 11 natives, and it cost us $1,500 just to do that. We tried looking at to see if there was any chemicals that we could spray over the top that wouldn't kill our natives but would kill all the weeds around it, but there's not any registered with the SWINS program, so that sort of got ruled out. But in saying that, I'm not sure it's going to be a huge problem if you were doing it on a commercial scale, because it wouldn't be such an issue if you had weeds, because you're not trying to take the measurements of those exact natives compared to nothing, or just without the interactions of weeds. So I'm not really sure about that, but yeah. The cover crops that mixes were really fast growing, and so we've had to undervine mow them quite a lot or weed eat them, so that's taken some time as well. So we've also tried doing some establishment from seed. So in 2020 we did poa, which is a native low growing grass. It grows pretty densely, and we were pretty excited about to try it. And then in the 2021, last year, we planted Lectinella dioicea. Sorry about my pronunciation, but it's a different sort of variation of the Lectinella than what we had in the original ones. But there's some issues that we had from that. We hydroseeded them both, which is a pretty new concept to viticulture, and as Lynn said, that they're more commonly used with like commercial grasses. And so in the first year they went down one side of the vine, and it looked like it spread over the entire understory area, but it seemed to only all the seeds all ended up on one side, and so the poa only grew on one side. So we learned from our mistakes, and in 2021 we went down both sides, but yeah, it had its challenges. Both the poa and the Lectinella are quite fine seeds, and so it's hard to get an even distribution when you mix them in with the hydroseeding. And Lectinella is also a fresh seed, so it has an expiry date, and you have to keep it in the fridge, and you have to sort of keep it aerated because it can go moldy. And so I'm not sure, it probably wouldn't work on a commercial scale just because of the timing of it. Also, in hindsight, we did these seedings in pretty bad timing. The poa we did in 2020, so when we did in spring, and we've had a really dry season that year, so probably didn't have the best establishment. You can sort of see it as you walk down the road. They've really grown really well in where our dripper irrigation is, but not so much in the other areas. The Lectinella we planted last year, and the day after it was announced that we were going into level 4 lockdown, so they probably didn't get the love and attention that they needed, and we had a really quite like maybe 2 months of no rain after it, so it was so didn't get enough water, probably is what it needed. And the weed maintenance for that has been really hard as well, because they're so low growing, and especially the Lectinella, you can hardly even see it. So to be able to remove those weeds whilst maintaining the little seedlings is pretty much impossible. So we've just sort of undervine mown them. But I want to say it's not all negative, because I don't want to end on a bad note, and I'm sorry to be the bearer of bad news, but yeah, I think we need to sort of turn these results around and use it to our advantage. So I think there is an opportunity to use undervine plantings in areas that may be best to devigor the vines. So maybe you have blocks that are variable, you might have ridges and hollows, so you can plant in the areas that are more vigorous than the others, and you might be able to end up having a more even block, might make it easier for harvest time. maybe blocks that you have to shoot thin or bunch in year after year and spend a lot of money doing that, then maybe you could devigor your vines by planting under vine. Maybe blocks that need excessive trimming or leaf plucking might be a good opportunity there as well. We've also only tried a few species, so there might be some more suitable crops out there. I know that there's people all around the country that have sort of been getting into contact with me, and they've all have different ideas of different plantings, so maybe one will work and it'll be the silver bullet that we're after. We also might have higher success with mixing our species, or maybe at higher planting densities, so that could be something to look into as well. Yeah, so thank you. I'd like to acknowledge for Calcalis. She started the program, the trial up, and she did an awesome job. I'm sure some of you have read her study after the first year was done. MPI fund us, so thanks to them. Plant and Food Research come and help us do some measurements for our Merlot block. Fruit Feed supplied the seedlings, the seeds for those hydroseeding rows, and just everyone else at Villa Maria who's helped on the thing. But yeah, if you have any further questions or want to have a chat, anything, or if you guys are doing any trials sort of surrounding this area, I'd love to hear from you. My email is sarah.george@indivin.com. So yeah, thanks.
Thank you very much, Sarah. It seems Villa Maria has definitely taken one for the team. And research is always hard, you know, and you hope that you get results, but not learning things or learning things that things don't work is just as valuable as learning things that do work. So yeah, so participants, feel free to pop your questions and comments in the chat, or if you've got any experiences that you want to share, I can unmute you if you'd like. So I do have a question for you, Sarah, though. Did you get an opportunity, or is it too soon to see? Because one of your goals I read in your paperwork was that one of your goals is not only to reduce chemical and tractor use, but to improve soil structure and moisture. Did you manage to get any information around that?
We haven't really measured it. We weren't really quite sure how to do so, but I'm sure there's some studies sort of available. I know that study by Jean Marie Thompson sort of talks about that in her thesis, but yeah, we had quite a lot of things to measure at the same time, so we didn't end up measuring it, but yeah.
And if there is, could you tell you weren't using the tractor or the chemical use? I guess you still had to do the hand weeding, and I know the yield wasn't as high, but could you see there might be you're not spending so much, but even though you're not getting so much back in yield?
Yeah, that's a good point. But I mean, if you can, the hand weeding costs a lot. So if you can get away from that, then there is a potential there, I guess. But I mean, at this point in time, what we're doing is probably not viable for a commercial scale, I would say. Just because it's very timely, and yeah, it works on a trial basis, but I'm not sure it would work on a commercial scale.
Excellent. Lynn, did you have any comments or questions or final thoughts that you wanted to add?
Lynn, you're muted.
Oh, we're having a few techno problems today. That's okay. I can't unmute you either. All right, well, we haven't had any questions coming through, so we will wrap that up. But if you do have any questions, then both Sarah and Lynn will happy to answer them via email. Oh, there you go, Lynn, you made it.
Oh, great. Sorry, I couldn't unmute myself. The mouse wouldn't go there. Yeah. Yeah, I would like to say that as Sarah said, at this stage, it's hard for the practical applications. Just for example, we know so little about how to grow the mussel crop. So, we'll have a difficult time establishing them. And yeah, I would say once we start to learn more about them and also the species combination we could use, then it might shed more opportunity and light on the, the possibility of using it. And also, just in general, I feel it probably will pump your production cost up and, increase your cost by, for example, reduce the yield. But I mean, there is always a trade-off. There's probably opportunity to do a better marketing to increase your wine price. So yeah, I would think, there are a lot of possibilities in the future.
And I guess we just need to get more research off the ground and get some Crown institutes and universities and the industry itself to put their hand up like Villa Maria has done and just try and trial things.
Yeah, and also, as I mentioned before, the technology part is really important, the seed production. And also, when we're trying to use seed, we have no idea what's the quality of your seed and, how viable are they, what have they experienced that might influence their germination rate, all those things we don't know. So it's very hard to try to make it work now. It will be a long way that we need to know more about before it becomes possible.
All right, well, thank you both, Sarah and Lynn, for your time, and thank you to the participants of the webinar for joining in. We have been recording it and we'll be sending it out to everyone registered, and it also will be eventually on New Zealand Landcare's YouTube channel. So yeah, please do feel free to share it around. The more we can share our war stories, the more everyone learns from that. So thank you very much, and I'll end the webinar now.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.